aus Berlin. Hi, my name is Matthias Rillig, and today I will talk to you about, is microplastic a distraction from climate change? And so I'm going to make basically 2 points here, and I think the first one is the more important one, and that is that microplastic and climate change are part of a much bigger issue, and that issue is global change. So when you think of the various factors that can affect, well, in our case we think mostly about soils and terrestrial ecosystems, I think the climate change factors come to mind, like increased temperature, changes in precipitation patterns causing potentially drought. But then you have many other factors. If you think of an agricultural field, well, you would have disturbance, you would have pesticides, fungicides added, you would have salinity, and various other factors also, including invasive species or copper. Just a wide range of factors that can all be subsumed under the heading of global change. And all of these factors will really be what affects soils and terrestrial ecosystems and their processes and biodiversity. So really just basically picking out some elements of this much more complicated problem is not doing the problem fully justice. So really microplastic and global change are sort of part of the same story overall, namely of the story of how we as people are affecting ecosystems. And so rather than competing for attention, which I hope they're not, they should rather reinforce each other as topics and draw attention just simply to the fact of how we are affecting ecosystems and in how many various different ways. And I believe that if microplastic has drawn some more attention to soils and how we as humans are affecting soils, then all the better for it. I think this is good, and it should really contribute to helping the cause of global change overall. Just draw attention to this topic. So this is the first point. These two factors should really not be competing with each other because they are really two sides of the same coin, namely of the much bigger issue of global change. The second part of that question, is microplastic a distraction from climate change? Distraction implies that this factor is maybe not as important or maybe is overhyped. And so there's a couple of things to say to that. For soil, we really don't know much. This is a very, very young topic. It's basically a scientific baby. The first paper on there may be potential effects on soils was published in 2012. The first experimental studies came out in 2016 and 2017. So in the grander scheme of things, if you compare it to other factors such as nitrogen deposition or elevated CO2 or warming or precipitation change, this is nothing. So given that this field is so very young, there are just a lot of gaps in our knowledge. So for example, we don't really know the concentration of microplastic or the shapes and the forms and the types of microplastics that are out there in all but a very few soils where people have basically tried out methods even for detection. They're still being developed. So we really don't have a very good knowledge base for how much microplastic is out there. And we are only sort of scratching the surface in terms of mechanisms and effects. Mostly actually just effects and less so the mechanisms in terms of where our understanding is at the moment. So it is entirely possible that effect sizes are small. I hope they are, because if they aren't, it might be really bad news. So does that mean we should just not worry about it and hope for the best and hope that this problem goes away if we ignore it? I think that would be wrong. I think we need to find out, we need to conduct studies, we need to do research to figure out what exactly is out there and also what are the effects and what are the mechanisms via which this material might be affecting soil biodiversity and ecosystem process rates. We really need to find this out. Also, it's important to remember that the absence of evidence is not evidence of the absence of something. We may have also just not looked at the right places yet. We have examined so few parameters, really. We may have not picked the response that's really important to consider for terrestrial ecosystems. Maybe it's more greenhouse gas emissions or shifts in community composition. We've only really scratched the surface on these types of questions. One criticism that's often put forward is, are the doses that we use in our experiments, and others, are they really realistic, or are they just completely exaggerated? And the real answer is we don't really know, because we have so few point estimates of what might be real concentrations out there, and for some of them they really are in the range. But also this misses a bit the point, because global change biology is not about what's going on now only, but it is also about projecting what might be happening in 50 years or 100 years if we continue disposing of material in the environment, and if this material really does not degrade efficiently and therefore would be expected to accumulate. We don't have really good evidence of this yet, but this is the best guess that we currently can venture. So we think this material is going to accumulate in the environment, and therefore it is entirely reasonable also to test some concentrations that probably are higher than the concentrations we would now observe. And plus, for finding out mechanisms, it's often not a bad idea to look at fairly high concentrations so we can more clearly ascertain what are the mechanisms at play. So this is not all completely misinformed, I think. So basically, I think the conclusion is we need to really move the conversation to global change. That is what's really happening out there. It's not just climate change, certainly not just microplastic or any of these other factors that we've talked about. And only when we really talk about the various ways in which we people affect our planet and its ecosystems and its biota, I think, can we resolve this potential discussion about is attention given to one factor basically distracting from the attention given to another factor. I think this is not a productive discussion, and I think it can really be most thoroughly dissolved by this adjustment to talking about global change and to really thinking about multiple factors affecting our ecosystems, not just the selected few that we've picked for the discussion. Oh boy, that video was something, huh? So if you liked it, don't forget to hit like and remember to subscribe to this channel. See ya.